if y'all are ready to go ahead.
All right. Mr. President, members of the board, I want to thank you for this opportunity, as I will have our Director of Safety, Mr. Hewish, and one of our SROs at Chandler High School, Officer Dew. I know Mr. Hewish will share some of the roles that Officer Dew does, not only in our schools, but within the state from a policing perspective. We're pretty fortunate to have him in our schools. I know that early on when he was at Kyrene and there was some opportunities to get him into Chandler, every time his name came up that we had an opening, we were trying to snag him to get him in our campuses, and we've been pretty fortunate to have him in our schools and especially at Chandler High. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hewish, who is our Director of Safety, to share this presentation today.
Good evening, Mr. President and school board members, Frank.
You might have to get a little. You might, if you want to use.
Okay. Otherwise, can you hear me now with this? Or do I? Yeah, you want to use it. Okay. It's on. Okay. Is this going to be much better? So, okay, thank you. So this evening, I am very thankful that I have the opportunity to be here. I'm not going to lie to you, I feel much more comfortable being out in the lobby, greeting everyone that comes to the meetings versus being in the meeting. But I wanted to share with you some very important things as it pertains to the school safety program. And having been in law enforcement, I was over 12 school resource officers with Phoenix for about 2.5 years. I understand the importance of getting grant monies in order to have the SROs on campus. However, as we know, a part of the school safety program, it is very important that we have multiple players, and 3 of those would be your social workers, your counselors, and your school resource officers. And the vast majority of my presentation tonight is talking about the grants as it pertains to SROs. Okay, the school safety program was established in 1994, and it's based on the Arizona Revised Statute 15-154. And the Department of Education administers the school safety program in cooperation with the courts, law enforcement agencies, Law for Kids, the ones that are doing the law-related education. The ADE safety grant funding can only be used to pay for the salary and benefits of the school resource officers, juvenile probation officers, and of course our social workers and counselors. And then I'm going to do a little glance back as to the safety grants and CUSD from 2018 to 2022. Okay, the number of school safety grants for social workers, the positions that were fully or partially funded, in 2018 there were 3. In 2019, 3, 2022, 2021, 3, and then in 2022, 12. Which was remarkable and wonderful to get that kind of funding. The number of SRO positions that were fully or partially funded during the same time period, there was 2018 had 3, 2019 3, 2020 3, 2021 3, and in 2022 we had 6. But during the second semester of 2022-23, which was in the 3rd year of that 3-year grant, they sent messages saying, hey, you guys are going to pick up 4 more SROs, which was wonderful. And so that took our total positions to 10 by the end of the school year 23. Okay, and so now fast forward to this next grant cycle, the next 3-year grant from 23 to 26. The Arizona Department of Education, they opened up the school safety program application portal in January 3rd, 2023. As I mentioned before, being part of an SRO program with the Phoenix Police Department, I understand the importance of getting things done in a timely fashion and being accurate in doing so. And so they opened up the portal and they said that the school districts have until April 15th to submit their paperwork. And that was, again, for all participants in the safety program. So that would be our social workers, counselors, and our SROs. The funding for the complete applications was awarded to the school districts on a first come, first served basis. So that is why we were very diligent in getting the paperwork and all that submitted in the applications. The applications were submitted on March 8th in 2023. And again, that's across the board for the SROs, social workers, and counselors. Okay, in 2023, the ADE, as far as grant funding, an application was filled out for the schools, and then ADA has only funded us, and this is where I made my blunder. I have 11 there. It's actually 10 right now that ADE is sponsoring. And before I shared my presentation, I failed to make that change. The funding, again, is for a 3-year grant cycle, which commenced on July 1st of 23, and it goes through June 30 of 26. For the SROs, we were fortunate to get 12 SRO grant funds, and that will be for each of our junior highs and our high schools. And again, that grant cycle is the same. Okay, ADE has awarded CUSD over $1.7 million for each of the next 3 school years for the 12 SROs. And that equates to $5.3 million plus in SRO grant funding over the next 3 years. The SRO pay is based on the salary and benefits schedule for each police department. And then as we know, the Chandler Police Department provides SROs for the following 9 schools that are up there. Gilbert provides SROs for the Payne Junior High and Perry High School, and then Queen Creek for Castile High School. The Arizona Department of Education and Law for Kids provides the SROs the law-related education LRE training. One other blunder that I made is the membership into the ASRO and then NASRO is actually encouraged. And so I have that down as the membership. Additional training electives include suicide prevention training, school-based threat assessment training, training specific to equity, diversity, and inclusion, and then de-escalation training. And duties and responsibilities of an SRO, again, is to contribute to a safe school environment that is conducive to teaching and learning. And then again, as you see on the bullet points, develop positive interaction, provide students and staff with law-related education, be a part of the SSAPT, and that's the School Safety Assessment and Prevention Team. And then they're through the comprehensive prevention and intervention, provide a visible presence on campus and deal with related issues, and then serve as an available resource to the school community. One such opportunity that we were able to utilize one of the Chandler SROs is recently with a couple break-ins at Patterson. And the Gilbert police officer came out, took the initial investigation, but was kind of at a standstill, but was able to provide information and photos of the perpetrators to one of our SROs at Basha High. And he immediately was able to recognize him because the time he spends out on the campus and getting to know the individuals, the students and staff. And as it pertains to lockdowns, evacuations, so the junior highs and the high schools, lockdowns and fire evacuation drills are coordinated by the SRO in conjunction with the security team. But the oversight lies with the school district. So it's our safety program, and we get to decide how we're going to run it, and it's a privilege to always work with those in the safety program. Okay, as far as the SRO program requirements, the SRO is required to be on campus 80% of the time, have quarterly meetings with their campus safety team, and attend yearly SRO advanced LRE training. The program requirements, so on September 15th of this year, ADE came out and they removed, they removed the 180-hour requirement for LRE. However, the police departments, CUSD, we got together, and we know how important LRE is, the benefit of the LRE training. And so the SROs will still teach 100 hours of LRE in the junior highs and 80 hours to the high schools. The purpose of the law-related education: prepares students for responsible citizenship, promotes problem-solving skills, discourages delinquent behavior, promotes positive self-image, encourages students to respect rules and laws. Okay, the school safety, it's SSAPT. The team consists of the school principal or the assistant principal that oversees the SRO position at their campus, and a prevention coordinator, or a behavioral health expert, and other members as needed. So again, this team is one that they will discuss what is happening at their campuses, the trends, and other concerns that they may have. And then they have an opportunity to discuss it, come up with an action plan on how to resolve concerns at their campus. So as you can imagine, each campus is going to vary based on jurisdiction, based on other things. But again, they meet often, and even if it's not a formal meeting, they're meeting pretty much daily in order to be able to discuss with one another what maybe some of the concerns are, but also what the victories are on their campuses. The reason behind the school safety assessment and prevention team is to conduct school needs assessments, coordinate prevention programming, design clear and appropriate strategies and activities, and then make recommendations for continuous improvement of the program. The Arizona Department of Education, they conduct needs assessments on an ongoing basis, and that is to determine if the SRO position is doing what it says it's supposed to do. It coordinates efforts with the police departments, again with CUSD, and other organizations that give input into the safety program. And then I'm the safety grant coordinator for CUSD, and I collaborate with the 3 police department partners by sitting in on the SRO candidate interviews. So I had the opportunity during my first year was to sit in with Queen Creek, to get Officer Weber at Queen Creek. And then I was able to sit in with Officer Pitts, who's assigned to the ACP Middle School. So I had the opportunity to sit in on the interviews and just to be able to listen to see would they and are they a good fit for our campuses, and I believe they are. The other is receiving feedback to the SROs. So when they do their evaluations, the police sergeant do their evaluations of their SRO officers, the principal, I get to give input as to what we're seeing is going on, how well they're blending, and obviously if there's any concerns, we also bring that up. Also meeting with campus leadership to see how the SRO is doing. So if there's a principal or someone on the campus that has some concerns about the SRO, it's only fair that we talk about it and then we involve the SRO supervisor so that they're aware of the situation. And if this supervisor needs to do any recommendations or changes, they obviously can do that. But what we're dealing with right now is we have some good SROs that are doing their job. And again, we have a lot of communication back and forth with the police departments, not only Chandler, but again, Gilbert and Queen Creek. And then the next several slides, I'm going to turn it over to Officer Stephen Dew. So he is the ASRO, the Arizona School Resource Officers Association president, and he has been for just under a year, or just a little over a year now, and he is the current SRO at Chandler High School and has done a tremendous job. But being the president over this association, he has a lot of knowledge as to what the program entailed, but more importantly, what the Chandler Police Department is doing to train up their employees. And so I'd like to turn the time over to Stephen.
Mr. President, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. Steve Dew, Chandler Police Department. I've been with Chandler for 19 years. It'll be a glorious 20 years in October, and it's been a wonderful opportunity to be a part of the community I call home as well. So specifically, some of the things I'm going to share with you are going to be about our Chandler Police Department School Resource Officers, but much of it applies to Gilbert and Queen Creek. So one of the things that sets us apart from other agencies, I believe, is we are continuing to strive, whether that's through technology, through training, through national and local recommendations. We have found ourselves as recipients of being a model school resource officer program. as well as our individual officers have received various awards and recognitions throughout, even recent as a few months ago. And not to tout anything, but I received one of those. It was pretty nice. But in regards to training, there's areas of training that I'm going to speak on. Our Chandler Police Department specific training, the school safety program, which includes new officer and leadership training, as well as training to conduct law-related education within the classroom, and that's referred to as advanced LRE. Then a specific training that is provided on a yearly basis through the Arizona School Resource Officers Association. And this upcoming year, our conference is going to be in Phoenix, and the national conference and national association will be here. So we're excited to collaborate with them, and that's another opportunity for even more advanced training for our local officers. And when it comes to the triad, you might have heard of the triad before when it comes to school resource officers. As a police officer, educator, and informal counselor or mentor or role model, we have followed some of the national, more current recommendations to include that element of being an emergency manager or consultant for that campus or community that the SRO is contributing to and assisting with. And in each of these areas, we find it, just to break these out just a little bit more, as a police officer, I know the resources and I know the availability of the community and the stakeholders. And so as with that knowledge, I'm able to provide that information to our campus and further collaborate with existing resources, structures, and programs. When it comes to education, I mentioned being an educator. We receive training as to how to utilize best practices, interactive practices, evidence-based practices, and these are all governed by the Arizona Department of Education. And through the training arm of the State Bar, which is the Arizona Foundation for Legal Services and Education. There's a lot to go into there, but those are just some of the stakeholders that contribute to our success in the classroom. Then when it comes to being a mentor or a role model, it's extremely valuable to be an individual, an approachable adult, so that we might add to those protective factors for students, staff, and the surrounding community. And then when it comes to emergency response and being a consultant or a manager, that expertise comes into play. And when I've assisted schools within the Chandler community, they all have their specific needs, their specific layout. Everything from environmental design to available staff members for specific emergency procedures. And so having my background, or the SROs having training in such, they're able to contribute to the positive outcomes when it comes to emergency response and assisting in those areas. Now, specifically about the Chandler Police Department training, every year we have advanced officer training. And this is dictated by the Arizona Post Police Officer Standards and Training Board. And so there's an extensive amount of training that we're required to maintain as police officers. A variety of things, everything from implicit bias to emotional intelligence to tactical and legal considerations for how we conduct our business. So these are just things that we receive as normal police officers. In addition to that, we found it beneficial to have our school resource officers be crisis intervention team trained. And these are crisis intervention teams exist within Chandler, within the patrol division. We have a mental health unit that's being developed, and you'll see this crisis CIT trained officer throughout the state. And that is a recognized training and collaboration that takes place to assist officers responding to scenes in which someone may be going through a mental health crisis. So we found that it's very valuable to train each of our SROs in that. In addition to that, you've heard of youth mental health first aid. We also certify our officers as youth mental health first aiders, for those of you that are familiar with that program. We go through additional training, solo engagement training, which is active shooter training, and how to respond when you are the only one on scene. We want to be prepared for such events. And then the carbine training, that is a certification in which our officers are certified to use a rifle in response to incidents. Then we come up to the school safety program. And some of these areas of training are received initially in that new officer and leadership training, and some of these are also included in the advanced LRE that seasoned SROs receive each year. Understanding a child's perspective, adolescent brain development, trauma response practices, regulation, de-escalation, child and adolescent mental health, working with youth with emotional disabilities, and then advanced LRE, as I mentioned before. And then just so for your information, some of the sessions and training that was available through the Arizona School Resource Officer Association included many of the following that were extremely beneficial: nationally recognized speakers and subject matter experts in their areas of expertise. Just a few that I highlight here: the brain science and de-escalation and legal issues in the school environment. It was a great conference, and it was really beneficial to have the support of the Chandler district and the wonderful attendance of stakeholders. We held our conference at Basha High School, and our food and nutrition services were our caterer, and it was just excellent, excellent. So I just appreciate all around the support that the district has provided to our national or our state organization. They really contributed to high quality training that took place over the summer. Then talk a little bit about assessments and oversight. Now, some of these are Chandler Police Department specific, as well as school safety program specific requirements. We are asked to maintain a weekly log as part of the school safety program. This is collected monthly within our monthly activity logs. And that log includes quantifiable data points that the police department uses when it comes to our strategic planning, when it comes to 21st century policing model and standards, and through our accreditation process, that is also the data that we use when it comes to youth interactions and community outreach. So those monthly activity logs are very valuable in our analysis of what our officers are doing and the things that they are contributing to on a campus. Some other things that, when it comes to evaluation, are biannual SRO evaluations. The principal or designee on a campus is asked through the school safety program to evaluate that officer twice a year. And so that format is facilitated through the Arizona Department of Education. And that's another element of oversight and evaluation, separate from what the police department would do when it comes to that officer's yearly evaluation. And then the program application, or the mid-year and end-year report that the Arizona Department of Education asks for, this varies from year to year on what that looks like. Sometimes it's very extensive and detailed. For example, asking for agendas from the school safety and assessment and prevention team, and some of the details that have taken place in those meetings. They've asked in previous years for data in regards to successes and challenges that might have taken place on a campus. So that varies from year to year specifically what they ask for, but it's a mid-year and year-end report that is submitted every year. Then some of the other things when it comes to oversight is the school safety assessment and prevention team really thrives on data, whether it's student surveys, whether it's data from incidents that have happened off campus that maybe are involving juveniles, whether it's national trends. I'm excited that the Chandler High is going to be participating in the Arizona Youth Survey. That is a great source for evaluation and moving forward with improving existing programs and looking at opportunities to provide additional resources. Then our annual officer evaluation, that's our police department specific evaluation that takes place. And then all along the way, there's always programmatic reviews, and that is principally up to the site level administrator, the principal or the designee responsible for how that officer is being used on that campus, and the review of the safety team and application. And with that, I guess I open it up to questions.
All right, thank you very much, guys. That's awesome. It's neat to see kind of a peek under the hood of the actual science that you guys do is similar to the way teachers have to do. It's human nature and the science of everything you have to do. It's not just going out and, taking care of bad guys. Well, it is, but it's not.
No, and I just wanted to caveat that because being a school resource officer, it is a prevention-based program. It is the most proactive thing you could possibly do in policing. And, we go back years with the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing and community policing and procedural justice principles. And every department that is trying to be successful within their community has those outreach opportunities, those interactions during non-enforcement events. The same thing takes place on a campus because I don't know. I'm trying to get off my soapbox for a second, but it really is the most proactive thing we can do when it comes to having a positive interaction with an authority figure in the life of a youth, and at the same time working with those stakeholders on a campus for them to be as successful as they can.
All right, thank you.
Sorry.
Guys, Kurt, would you like to go first?
Yeah, you did talk about, I guess, some assessment or annual assessment reports you do, and I've never seen one. Do you provide those to the board as well? In things such as the recommendations that you had, the observations that you had, survey results, and maybe some of the data on some of the interactions that you have. That would be very useful for us, I think.
Yeah, so when it comes to collecting such data, I think when you're talking about the annual reports that are received through the Department of Education, those are ones that are initiated by the Department of Ed, and then it trickles down to that district representative, to the principals, to complete and fill out and submit. So that would be one source of review. When it comes to our interactions with youth, gathering SRO-specific data, sometimes it's anecdotal, sometimes it's individual experiences that take place or individual incidences that are documented. The monthly logs, some of those capture some of those positive interactions. So the number of positive interactions with youth or informal counseling that might take place, those are all quantified numbers that the police department gathers. And those monthly logs and that information are typically submitted through our supervisor, which Director Hewish has access to. So those numbers are available.
And to add to that, so at least twice a year, the Arizona Department of Education, they send out what they call either a survey or a questionnaire. And it usually encompasses about 4 to 5 questions. And it is going to be something that they send to me, and then I send it out to the principals. And they give them usually a week to 2 weeks to get this filled out. And this is where they get some other information from what has been going on, the trends at the campus, or trends throughout the school district, and they review that information at the Arizona Department of Education. And that's how they start to develop some of their programming as far as what are some of the needs assessments for the SROs.
If I would add, Board Member Roars, so if there's information such as the end of the year report, that all the data that's collected and information that's collected that's submitted from each school, we can definitely make that available to board members that want to see that.
Well, I wasn't looking for 1,000-page, 10,000 foot, but, you know, your officers are on campus, they see a lot of things. I'd like to hear about, you know, what their experiences have been, how it was handled, how it should have been handled, so we can learn a little bit more about discipline in the schools and stuff like that. I think it'd be very, very useful for us. You understand what I mean?
Yeah, I feel like those type of data points are underreported. Like there's so many good experiences and good interactions that have taken place that I just think of, you know, a lot of times when people ask me similar questions, I think of, okay, what did I do this week? And okay, I can tell you what I did this week. Yesterday, I helped a family who was struggling with a teen that is often truant and is a runaway. I collaborated with a local agency to try to help them find additional resources to help anchor that student within the school community a little bit more. Provided intervention when there was a threat that was made over social media, and contacted all the parents and parties involved to try to resolve that through mediation. I'm just thinking about this week. So sometimes those experiences are reported on the monthly log and reported to the school safety assessment and prevention team, but I think we could do a better job of promoting such things. I really think we do. We could.
Okay, so just very simply, what your officers are seeing, what your kids are saying. That's the sort of things I'd like to know. Okay? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. I think Ms. Marsden had her hand up.
Yes. I'm curious as to what type of topics are included in the LRE classes that you teach students.
Which elementary did you say?
LRE.
LRE, their education, law-related education classes that they teach the students.
So where that begins, and I can give you an example of Officer Gomez. Officer Gomez over at Santan Junior High. They love OG. Oh my goodness. They love that guy. And it starts with a needs assessment that's completed by the school safety assessment and prevention team by reviewing available data. Are they having issues with vapes? Are they having issues with cyberbullying or things like that? And I know in years past, Officer Gomez saw, and his staff, his team, indicated that, you know, we think it'd be really valuable for him to teach internet safety classes to the 7th grade. And so that kind of information gets logged in his monthly log, and that was an example of curriculum. It could vary from school to school depending on what their assessment reveals.
Okay. And then I guess my second question is, I guess, what do you think is one of the most valuable characteristics an SRO officer can have in the schools?
Well, for me, it's obviously being honest and being a team player, because this SSAPT team is very important to, again, decide what is needed at their campus to help these students feel safe while they're on the campus and to succeed and be definitely law-abiding citizens. And that is the goal of this, or is just to be honest and be able to listen to what the youth have to say.
To sum it up as succinctly as I can, probably a collaborative role model when it comes to optimistic problem solving.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions?
I have
Mr. Worth.
several, couple. And as I listened to your presentation, my sense was you're buried in paperwork. Is that accurate? Is the mic on, Mana? So, as I listened to your presentation, I came to the conclusion you're just buried in paperwork.
Well, one thing I learned as an early patrol officer is that the most powerful skill that I have is my typing skills. And yeah, there is a lot of evaluations that take place, a lot of paperwork. But I found over the years that each play an important role in really knowing the pulse of a school climate and community. And so, sure, maybe there's some things that we can reduce or mitigate. I'm more than willing for you to give recommendations to the Department of Ed or anyone else that wants to get rid of paperwork.
I might fail in that area. And the other thing I ran into at the start of the school year, I ran into parents with young kids, and they said they were afraid of the police. Is that a common thing that you've run into in the elementary schools?
Well, I had the opportunity to serve as a school resource officer for 7 years at Summit Academy. They had an elementary campus as well as a junior high campus. And I found that whenever I needed a pick-me-up, I'd go over to the elementary campus because I found nothing but acceptance on the elementary side. And, I think overall, and this is where data collection would be really valuable to, when I have completed data at my other campuses and been able to submit surveys to what the students really think about their school resource officer. Overwhelmingly, it's been positive, in the 90 percentile of acceptance and appreciation for that officer.
I think it's positive, but for some reason the kids, I guess because their parents are getting vehicle speeding tickets and things like that. But I was shocked that I had heard it from as many parents as I did that their young kids were a little bit afraid.
If I can add, I'm sorry, that's me. If I can add, Joel, I think that's fair. I mean, in some communities that is the case, because it depends on your experience. It's funny, as you were talking, you mentioned Officer Gomez, and I was going to bring it up because I can tell you that there's something with my son's experience with his SRO and my experience personally with police, right? So over this holiday break, my son and I were attending our church that we go to, and Officer Gomez happens to be out there, and he hasn't seen my son since he was in junior high, and he's in college now, getting ready to graduate. They saw each other, knew each other right off, and they're hugging and talking because that was his SRO. I will tell you, that was not my experience as a kid. So we do have to take that into account, that there are people in our community that's their experience isn't necessarily a positive one, and some of it is fair and some of it is not, right? And it just depends on your experience, where you grew up, the interaction you had with the police, whether your perception was it was positive or negative. I can tell you that I share this with you because I think it's important. I wear a couple different hats on my experience, life experience from a police perspective, and I brought this up many times when we have what we're doing with our SROs. Now that I'm adult, there's times I've had experiences with police that I didn't think were very good, but as adult I thought about it. I was like, okay, well, what I saw was probably what was supposed to happen, right? But as a kid and a young kid and not knowing what's going on, but I've also saw experiences that I know that weren't right? So I think one of the things that I think I can only speak for the officers in our schools, and that's because of the partnership we have in the expectation of what we want from our SROs and our officers, and what our officers in the department want from their officers on our campuses in the community.
But Craig, what I really heard it though was, and it shocked me, it was really grades K through 3. That's what shocked me about it.
You might have heard it from grades through 3, but I can tell you it's K through 12 and beyond.
No,
So
that makes sense to me, beyond. But the first 3 grades is what threw me off. I was shocked.
Well, I would just tell you from experience, I'm not surprised on that early age, because it depends on how often that child has had experience or their family has had experience with police, good or bad, right? So it's what is the conversation that you have with your child at that time as to whether that was a good experience or a bad experience depends on the experience of that family. And I can only speak from
I was
my
just
own
thinking,
experience.
is it possible somehow at those early ages to have police figure out a way to make the kids feel comfortable and not fear it?
Wasn't that with the DARE? But I mean, we don't.
I think also, Dr. Gilbert, if I may, being in elementary for as long as I was, it's all about the relationship. Our SROs that have great relationships with kids foster those great relationships with everything they do, whether it's negative or positive. Any interaction they have to take, it comes through the keeping the relationship in the forefront. Fire does the same thing. When they go into those primary classrooms, they're heroes, right? It's spending time, it's being in close proximity of, and it's the amount of time that you have exposures in positive ways that keep those connections going. It was that old expression, two groups of people can't learn anything about each other if you keep them apart, right? So what I love about the SRO program really does enable our kids to interact with people they would never interact with. I mean, tell me which one of you, when you're speeding down the road and all of a sudden there's lights behind you, doesn't freeze up and feel a little uncomfortable about what's ready to come? It's just a natural response, right? But our kids, when they interact with officers like Gomez does, and like you do too, I see you do it at Chandler High. You know, they're singing, they're out there at football games, they're embedded in the community. That's the perfect difference, and I think that's what we want out of our SRO officers, and I think that's what this department has done really well with, is securing officers that want to be in that passionate role of developing students and citizenry. So it is a relationship.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, our SROs are community members as well. And so they have a vested interest in doing their very best and helping to educate. I try to hit as many camps as I can each month. And when I do so, we also try to invite officers that this is part of their beat area to just stop by. And because the more time they have FaceTime with these students, the less afraid, I would say, they're going to be of these officers. But you do have to take into consideration some of the students' parents have had lots of run-ins with the law. And therefore, they're going to have some skewed feelings about law enforcement. But it's great when we have the SROs going in the classrooms teaching LRE.
I think we had a question from Ms. Rano.
Well, I do have questions, but I do also want to state it's not just the personal experience that maybe some of our students or their parents and families have had, but also what we see inevitably, right? We live in a world of social media and things are documented in a different way than when I even grew up, and kids are seeing a different side of the reality sometimes of things and what statistics show, right? So I wouldn't put it just like on the kids' perception, but really looking into what the reality is when we look at these interactions nationally, at least. So I know at the beginning of today's presentation, because safety is the priority, I think, and why SROs started coming onto campuses more nationwide after Sandy Hook, actually. And I heard the importance of the trifecta of our social workers, our counselors, and SROs. And I want to make sure I understood where we're at with the numbers now. I know there was like a typo and stuff, but is it correct to say that today we now have 10 social workers and 12 SROs funded?
That is correct.
Okay, so
So it's 9 social workers and 1 counselor? Okay.
I think I heard you, Natasha, 10 social workers and 1 counselor? So we have 11 total. To 12 SROs. Okay, so, I mean, I know that we can't directly do something about that, but, you know, shifting that balance a little bit further since we know the importance of the 3.
Yes.
If I can add to that, and I think you alluded to it, we can only control so much. We're pretty fortunate that we have. I'll be honest with you, we're pretty fortunate that we have the number of social workers and counselors that we've received, as well as the SROs that we've had. And as you know, the counselors and social workers didn't come into play until I think it was 2 years ago. At that time, we applied for counselors and social workers, and we were able to get some. I've mentioned to you in passing, one of the things that we did with the new cycle for the state grants was, because it was first come, first serve, so we were pretty close to being up front. And we applied for all of our schools, not only for SROs, but we also applied for social workers and counselors. So we're still waiting to see if we're going to get any of those, because it's going to come from an approval. Now, in my opinion, because we put it in some time ago, we should have already received some more. But right now, going through the process, I know there's things that have to be done. So I will tell you that from a district perspective, we see it all as important, because we don't see that it's one over the other. It's both are important, which is why the first thing we did was we had every school submit. We've been fortunate that in the past, if the money is allocated to, let's just say, a school out in the Phoenix area, a school district out in the Phoenix area put in for either SROs or counselors, and they can't fill the position, then that money sits there unused. Well, I'll be honest with you, from Chandler's perspective, we're waiting for them to call us and say, we have money for you, and we'll say thank you very much, and we'll get people hired. And so that's what we've done over the years, is to make sure that we're prepared so that if the money's available, and you have to submit, because if you don't submit for a counselor or a social worker, when the money is available, they don't call you because you didn't submit. So that's why we make sure we submit for all of our schools, because we feel the importance. But unfortunately, we haven't received any additional ones than what we've asked for in the past.
Thank you, Dr. Gilbert.
Just a clarification real quick, though, because we have people in the audience who may not understand that. We have more counselors and social workers per ratio than we have SROs in our schools. I don't know, Natasha, can you give us an example of how many counselors and social workers we have in our district? I don't want the public to think from the study session that we only, oh, this is what we received out of this particular grant. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. Great question. There is a school counselor at every single CUSD school, at least one school counselor. Total, we have about 124 school counselors and social workers throughout CUSD. So the safety grant is just a small portion of employment in regards to those counselors and social workers, and our ratios comparatively to surrounding districts are much, much better.
And that kind of leads into my question, since through the grant, we did see a reduction in the support and lost technically some positions. I was wondering, did we technically retain those same individuals, but through separate funding?
So anybody that had a social worker and that one counselor previously, when that grant cycle ended and we applied again, we received all funding for all of those positions. So we didn't lose any. Okay. We applied for additional, and what Dr. Gilbert was sharing was, you know, we're ready whenever they want to hand us that money, so.
Yeah, so the Arizona Department of Education, so they give allocations, and if the school district doesn't have an SRO in position, they have through like December of that year in order to hire an SRO. And then if they don't get SROs hired, then in January is when they start looking at the monies that they have left over for the school safety program. And just like I mentioned about the SROs, we originally had 6, and then during the third year in January, they let us know that, hey, you have 4 more SROs. So we fully expect that we're going to get some more funding. But just quick little numbers. So based on the grant that we have right now, so each year, we have grant funding for $1,795,000, like I mentioned before, for a grand total of over $5 million over 3 years. With our social workers and school counselors, we have been awarded $854,000 each year, which equates to $2.5 million over the 3-year period. So the Arizona Department of Education is giving funding, and we just hope to get a lot more in the way of social workers and counselors.
Thank you. The other thing, and I forgot to say thank you, but everybody who had something to do with today's presentation. This is something that's important clearly to me, and I have questions, and I apologize for that. But as I was previewing actually tonight's presentation, and this is something I've brought up in the past, I think our goal as a district is to offer the best quality we can at each of our school sites. It is complicated that we work with 3 different cities and police departments, but trying our best to mirror practices across campuses, knowing, as we learned tonight, that Chandler is actually considered model in a lot of its practices and implicitly more so requires a lot of the training that I see as elective. And I think I have some concerns knowing that some of our campuses have SROs that implicitly through their department are expected to go through a lot of these elective trainings, and they're receiving them. And I think because of that, maybe Chandler is effective and shows model practice, while the other departments do not necessarily, that I've seen. And so the practice at those school sites might be quite different than the practices that we see through our SROs out of Chandler. So I would like to pose, and I know you can't do anything about this, but to maybe the administration as we work through the IGAs with the other cities, if we can do something to model more so what we're seeing with Chandler, and that they do include the elective trainings more as a requirement for best practice.
If I can add to that, and then maybe you guys could help with that. What I'd with all due respect, I'd want to be careful to say that the other departments aren't doing something. We're just fortunate that we have an officer from Chandler that can speak collectively as to everything that's happening in Chandler. As for what policing and how police behave and the things that they do on our campus, going back to when Mrs. Genicello was in our district, we made sure that whatever officer was on our campuses were required to do the same thing. As a matter of fact, even when we didn't have all of our SROs funded through the state grant, we still required all officers on our campus to do the same thing that all the state grant officers had to do, because we thought it was important that there was some consistency. But with that said, I think it is important to make sure as we look at what our Chandler offices are doing and making sure that we're touching base with our municipality in Queen Creek and Gilbert, that we do have consistency and look at what it is they're doing in training. We can definitely do that. I'm not saying they aren't, but I just want to be fair to them, for them not to be able to speak for themselves and be here to say that they aren't. And what I can do is make sure I work with our team to see what Chandler's doing and what Gilbert and Queen Creek is doing, so that we can be very clear for you to know what exactly they are and aren't doing.
Yeah, because when we look at the electives and then we look at the duties and responsibilities, the elective trainings do directly align with a lot of the description, I think, that would support for best performing the duties. And again, if we know that some are and some aren't doing it, it'd be best if we just have all our SROs receiving the same training and practice, I think. Let me just look through my notes. So on the duties description, we see through comprehensive prevention and intervention, provide a visible presence on campus and deal with law-related issues. I was wondering what defines law-related issues on campus, and under what circumstances would a student per se, if we're talking about law-related, be detained or arrested on campus for any incident, whether or not took place on campus? If we could have a more definition behind what that looks like.
So each incident that might take place on a campus, the consideration as to what specifically happened is probably the number one. Okay, should this student be detained? Are they posing a hazard or a threat to others? What's the severity of the crime? Is there a victim that wants to aid in prosecution? Because sometimes I've had situations where an assault takes place, for example, and it's similar to an assault that took place, a month prior with two different students. And the victim's parent in the second event desired to aid in prosecution. So in those cases, typically a physical detaining tends to not take place. But a juvenile referral is submitted to the juvenile courts for that offense because there's a willing victim. And so the determination to quote-unquote arrest is influenced by the willing victim and the severity of the crime. I can tell you from my experience as a school resource officer for, we're going on 16 years now, I've detained, like put handcuffs on juveniles, I would say 4 times. And so it's really taking a look at not criminalizing juvenile behavior. Detaining or restraining is really a last resort, but it's a catalyst, or the catalyst would be that student posing a threat to others. And I can go back on my personal experience, my personal data, is the event in which the last time I had to arrest a student was after they'd assaulted a staff member and then was basically not complying with what was being requested, and there was a concern that this student was going to assault another staff member. And in that event, that student was detained through the use of handcuffs. There was felony charges being submitted in that situation, and that was at the request of the staff member. But that's, again, that's very rare. So the severity of the severity of the incident is a huge factor in whether or not a student is physically detained and arrested. And so hopefully that helps. And I can say that's pretty consistent with our other Chandler School resource officers, and especially when it comes to use of force. Best practices, you don't criminalize juvenile behavior.
To add to that, all of our officers have to follow the policies, procedures, the law as written in the ARS, Arizona Revised Statutes. So that's what gives arrest powers, juvenile, referral power. And so basically it's ARS which drives what they are and are not allowed to do.
The other thing, if I can add, I think the other piece that's real important is the partnership between administration and the SRO that's on that campus, which is why I think when you listen to Officer Dew and see how often he's had to do it, because it has to do with the administration and the SRO as a team. There are things that we've established on our campuses as to what should or should not happen with students, how parents are involved, where the administration is, and those type of things makes it so that it's not where it's not looking at the student and the student's behavior and automatically, put the police officer in a position where we're waiting for the officer to do something when it's really the school administrator's job to address the issue and bring your officer in as a team member when that is necessary.
In such incidents where it is a severe case and the SRO might do a juvenile referral, are the parents contacted in the immediate, or if the other kid says, are they asked and given the rights to, do you want to prosecute, or that has to come from contacting the parent?
Yeah, that has to come from a guardian.
Okay.
A guardian or a parent. It's not another juvenile's decision.
Okay. And then I think we just covered on-campus incidents. I think I know this answer, but I just want to clarify. If something takes place with a district student off campus that is seen as criminalized behavior, but nothing's been done, they go back to school, let's say it happens on the weekend, they go back to school Monday. Is there any jurisdiction, does the SRO get involved in any way, or is that treated completely separate if the police department wants to contact a student?
Before he answers, there's definitely going to be a lot of what ifs, what transpired, when, where, you know, there's a lot of things. Each situation is going to be vastly different from the other. But as far as how it overflows or spills into the community of the school, that's definitely where I have Officer Dew, maybe some example that he's had.
So if an event takes place off campus and a student returns to school, and let's say an outside agency wants to interview that particular student, it is my best practice to follow the collaborative agreement that we follow here in the Chandler District to notify the parent that this is taking place. I found it extremely beneficial. I call parents when I don't even have to call parents because I think it opens up a line of communication and a line of understanding so that I might convey the ultimate goal as an intervention as a result of an incident that took place off campus or on campus. Sometimes when I'm not on campus, there may be an outside agency that wants to speak with a student, and the district, and Mark could probably speak to this, there's a form to be completed if that corresponding agency does not want parents notified, because those parents might be involved in the activity or possibly a suspect in there. And so there's a level of liability that is identified with that form and acknowledgement of that agency that wishes to speak with a student on campus.
Yeah, and as, again, back to that ARS codes, there is no reason that an officer has to make these phone calls, but we as a district feel it is very important and necessary. So all of our police agencies are following that, and they're signing those forms, whether it is to contact the parent or because they are involved somehow and they're not to be contacted. But they do have the forms, and I know when Natasha gave her training, well, we talked about those forms as well.
All right, thank you, guys. Do you have any other questions, Ms. Reynolds?
I do, but I had emailed them so we could take care of them
All right.
through our email. Thank you.
Great. Well, guys, thank you very much, and thank you for your work in protecting
Mr.
our
President,
campuses.
just one last
Yes, sir.
comment, kind of end this on a maybe a little more upbeat note. Getting back to Officer Gomez, my kids went to Santan Junior High, so I saw him every morning for several years. And I just recently saw him in the last week or two doing security at an event at the high school. I don't know if the guy, ever sleeps, to tell you the truth. But he remembered exactly who I was, had a great conversation with him. He is really a credit to your department. He really does it right. The kids love him, parents love him, and I really want to wish him well. Thank you.
All right. Okay, with that, thank you very much, guys. We're going to wrap up this study session, and then we're going to take a 5-minute break and roll into our regular board meeting.